Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. I have a return guest on. I have Lee Granade back on. She was last on the show December 3rd, 2022, Season 3, Episode 168. There, she explained how judicial corruption is not limited to the Murdaughs in the Low Country. And her case is out of the 14th Judicial Circuit in South Carolina, which has enabled the Murdaughs, the super lawyers, and solicitors for nearly 100 years to prosper since the 1920s. They have been tied to moonshining and interference with juries, and most recently, insurance fraud and murders. So I welcome you back to the podcast, Lee. You've got some updates on your case, and I hope you're doing well.
Thank you. Thank you. My hair is still wet, honestly, from like 8 o'clock this morning. If that tells you anything. And
That's okay.
the bags under my eyes or the dark circles kind of tell a part of the story too, I think. But my case does look very different. I was in court on Tuesday, the 13th, and representing myself. I guess for the second time, I'm representing myself. So I was there and I took my ex in on a contempt motion. And that stemmed from the Hurricane Ian that came in through that South Carolina area. I believe it was September the 29th, when it was also a Thursday, which is my custodial time. So literally I'm on the island there and I'm there for my custodial time. And I typically don't have not challenged my daughter because she's the older one, and it's there's so much pressure on her to conform to dad's wishes. And so I've just sat back, and it's essentially 1,170 days that I've sat back and waited on the court to enforce their own order to let me see my daughter. Because the order was always there. It's not as though I had supervised visits or I had anything like that. Granted, he did allege abuse. None of it stuck. None of it. I've tried to see, it's amazing how little these people know. And I know you've had horror stories, but I'll call the attorney for DSS, which is our version of CPS. And I've said, what do you all do for false complaints? And they said, well, I mean, it's like I'm speaking Yiddish.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm here to tell you about a huge false complaint that's causing damage. And literally at, gosh, I guess it was July of 2020 when I had previously involved the police to see my daughter. And it's caught on video and it's called on 911 calls, but my ex has a third party attack me. And I'm not frail, but I basically just kind of, I just sort of get in a posture to take it. And and then I take pictures of whatever injuries happen. Well, on that instance too, I was also threatened with arrest. And just bouncing back to September, please, of this year when the hurricane was passing through, it's my custodial time. I'm literally shaking like I am this week because I'm so terrified. I'm scared. You may have watched that area of the Low Country got hit extremely hard. I think maybe twice in the last 5 years, just devastating. And what they were forecasting that particular night was just as bad, if not worse, than preceding hurricanes. And I understand that it did not cause that kind of damage, but here's the thing: when it's coming right at the island where you live, where he is living waterfront, And he insists that not just my daughter, but both children stay there. So I felt like that warranted a police call after DSS got involved. And I didn't just involve DSS that particular night. I involved the judge who had issued the original visitation order, and she was not really involved doing anything. So then I went to the Chief Justice of the South Carolina Supreme Court and his secretary, and I said, I consider this an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my visitation time. I have the police here. He's arguing with the police now for an hour. So if you can imagine, I have pictures. It's, if you can imagine sitting in the parking lot with a hurricane coming, you've got winds picking up, gusts of 20, 30 miles an hour. And my ex-husband's got the policeman there and he won't comply, which is how he rolls. And so the police officer calls his boss, his higher up. So that person comes again, same thing. And after an hour, the police officer, and this is recorded, he comes over and says to me, he's not going to let them come. And I said something along the lines of, you all are complicit. I mean, I'm putting you on notice that you're complicit. If my children are harmed tonight, today, tomorrow, however that might look, because I have literally taken it all the way to the state Supreme Court. I've taken it to DSS. I've taken it to the issuing order. I'm sorry, the judge who issued the order, I've taken it to law enforcement. I may have called some of the media on my way down there too, saying, do you want to help? It's kind of a blur, but I said, all of you are complicit.
Yeah.
In enabling this and count on me holding you responsible. And then I had to turn around literally and return home without either child.
Did they watch any of this happen?
They did. So William, who had come for visitation, so it was a 6 o'clock transfer. William had come, and if memory serves, as soon as the police went over to confront my ex, William went inside Panera Bread. I'm sure he watched from the inside, but it wasn't like he was close enough to hear everything. Lily, he produced her. And I should add too that when I asked the officer, what are you all going to do? And they said, well, you need to be in family court on Monday. And I'm going to go back to the station. We're going to talk it over. We're going to, whatever they do with those incidents. And he may be charged with kidnapping next week. And I said, well, that's a long time coming. So I will, we'll talk first of the week. Y'all need to get out of this hurricane as well. You've got other issues. I mean, literally, Marianne, there's sirens. There's no cars on the road. And he said that the officer that was in charge, when he came over, I said, sir, this makes no sense for him to claim safety is the reason he won't transfer the children for visitation. He said, of course I know, but we can't fix it tonight. And, I could have argued that, yeah, you really could arrest him. But again, we're talking about, the county attorney's roommate, and that would have, there's no telling what that officer would have endured. So I get it. And I went home.
It wouldn't have been so bad if they just would have said, hand over the kids. We have the order that you had, and just go in there and take the kids like CPS does. What's the problem?
I know they act like it's never happened. It's, you and I think we're on the same page that when you're dealing with people with that type of entitlement and they've gotten
Mhm.
away with so much for so long, every time they get away with such, they are more empowered, they're more enabled, they're emboldened.
Mhm.
I mean, heck, it's been successful. For my ex, it had been successful for, he's 62 years old. He's been successful that long. So that's when I said, again, never filing a motion or pleadings or anything in my life. I said, you know what? I'm just going to go on the judicial website. I'm going to pick what I think is most applicable and I'm going to start filing.
Mhm.
And thankfully, they have a very sweet clerk in the office. And she just says to me, I get it. I mean,
Mhm.
we don't dialogue, but she just says, I get it. And because I'm constantly apologizing for
Mhm.
using her time or not knowing what I
Mhm.
need. And she says, I get it. So anyhow, I filed a contempt,
Mhm.
which basically reads that um, it read something along the lines of he had to appear in court and explain why he should not be held in contempt. And as you heard, I think previously, I mean, we have over 250,000. It's probably well into the 300s that in legal and experts and all that kind of stuff. Um, so that had never happened with, and I'm not, the most recent attorney I had retained, I'm not passing any, this isn't shade at him at all. Um, it's not, it's just, we've tried essentially every different way. We've tried emergency hearings, we've tried modification of custody, we've tried change of venues, we've done motion to compels, we've done all of it.
Mhm.
And essentially this attorney, or I'm sorry, this court system let the last three years or so just slip by without seeing her mom. I don't know how you explain that.
It
So I
w-
think I'm sorry.
Oh, I just think they cater to um abusive males with bruised egos. Not all guys are abusive because I do have a lot of male friends that are going through hell, but there are these personality disorders that these courts are catering to and letting them run the show. I've seen this a lot.
Right. I think too, I think in my case that being in a military environment, being in a Beaufort, South Carolina is the home of Paris Island, the Marines. So typically military people are very respected.
Mhm.
So the fact that he lets it be known he's a retired Army colonel, actually a lieutenant colonel, at face value, it probably looks like he was successful and a decent person. Couple that with having roomed with the county attorney, again, you've got somebody that appears to, at first glance, it looks like he has things going on, and I must be the problem.
Mm.
Um, on top of that, still, I mean, he's a GS-15 or an SES in the federal government now in civil service, working for the Navy Information Warfare Center out of Charleston.
Hmm.
So basically, Navy intelligence for the Atlantic region filters through that office that he's in. So he has top secret clearance. So all of that together, again, at face value, it looks like you have a very, very successful, accomplished, whatnot.
Mhm.
You peel that onion just a little bit. You look
Yeah.
at those VA records. You look at the police reports. You watch the videos. You look at his own notarized documentation to me
Mhm.
back when we had a separation in 17, and it says if we have to again get separated,
Mhm.
I shouldn't be left alone with the children. And the court has that. So the court has my medical records, the children's medical records. The court has the restraining orders. The court has the copy of the geofences showing where he broke the restraining orders. The court has so much more. And, you know, again, 600 or 700 pages, I think, of VA records where it shows that even as an enlisted person, he didn't get promoted because he has a bad attitude. And apparently there was some drug usage as well. So then as an officer, he is told to, he's disciplined as an officer. So he had recognized that if I don't get out now, that, you know, I'm gonna be like the, you know, what's the Bible story where David and Bathsheba and her husband, is it Uriah? And she sends him to the front lines. And I think he really felt like that, oh my gosh, I have so many enemies here. They will send me to the most dangerous place
Mhm.
in the Middle East because, you know, they will make sure that I don't come home.
Mhm.
And he said, I need to be out now. So he had made enough enemies. What he had actually done is he had turned in his boss for an affair with his secretary. And apparently it hadn't occurred. So Colonel Earl, yes, Colonel Earl Smith is a full colonel, a minority, and a very good, kind man. And he was happy to testify for me as well. And my ex filed this complaint, this IG complaint against Colonel Smith that was completely unfounded. But that's him, you know, being disciplined for bad behavior. And he said, I'll make something up about you. And that is how he exited Walter Reed. So, and Colonel Smith, such a kind, good man, he penned this letter to my ex when he was my husband, and it says, I have very mixed emotions about your retirement.
Yeah.
And goodbye, essentially, is what it said.
Mhm.
So, anyhow, again, if you just peel the onion, and as I mentioned and the last time you had me on, you know, as a civilian, he had been disciplined, he had been reprimanded, he had been demoted, he had been suspended without pay.
Mhm.
And when you look at what percentage of federal employees are disciplined, Marianne, it's like 0.1%. So the
Right.
fact that he gets a habit of it,
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like, I mean, for me personally, it's very validating that I'm not the problem,
Mhm.
or I'm not all the problem. Don't hear me say that I was a perfect wife, or whatever. But he has this documented pattern that I chose to omit from the report.
Mm.
And so I've called them out. I think the guardian ad litem should be charged for perjury for misrepresenting that, same as the county attorney who inserted himself as a character witness for my ex, which he now denies, and which I'm just kind of throwing it around now because it's an affidavit with his signature, with his paralegal's notary stamp. And yeah, you did. So, and I was feeling sassy enough last night that I sent it all again. This is like my second or third amendment to the state bar for his grievance. But I said, dear sir and ma'am, like at what point do you all mandate a psych or it's some kind of intellectual evaluation? Like I've heard of specific people, even on the island, getting disbarred because of their inabilities, their compromised mental status. And I said, you know, this looks like one of those times where you want to use that option.
Wow. This guardian ad litem, you know, apparently corrupt. She can terrorize and threaten children's lives. And I can't imagine what she was doing to your kids.
I right. I don't know. I'm probably less of a rule follower than I used to be, but when she was involved with our family, I was very much a rule follower, and I made sure that I didn't utter a syllable, and I still don't.
Mm,
I still don't really utter a syllable that's you know, unkind about my ex, because they didn't choose that dad. I did.
mhm,
This is on me.
mm,
Um, so, however, dad apparently went from court, and I guess I'm getting back into I went in with this contempt hearing, and I was just trying to get four things accomplished. So it was the lack of visitation and adherence to the court order for what became 1,170 something days. Um, the second part was abuse and neglect of the children, which was also documented. The third part, I'm sorry, the fourth part was his his untruthful statements in prior court appearances.
mhm,
And I sought that all as a rule to show cause. And I read the it's somewhere around here about, what constitutes a rule to show cause. And it's anything that obstructs the court from being able to issue, do their job.
mhm,
So I said, you know what, perjury that's up there. Because if you're giving my testimony the same weight as his, then let me show you who should be believed in all this.
mhm.
And so I had those 22 instances. I had closer to 50, but the friend that was advising me said, Lee, just keep it to the 22 or so that pertain to the children's care.
Mhm.
And so I presented those four things. She refused to hear abuse and neglect. She said that because I can't even, I guess I didn't reference the part of my divorce decree that said neither one of us should abuse and neglect our child. So because I left that out of my pleading, she wouldn't hear it. And I snuck a recording device into the courtroom. And I don't know that I've told you that yet, but it was all caught. The other part that just blew my mind is I said, Judge, are you going to take up this matter of perjury?
Mhm.
Because I took a projector. I took a
Mhm.
projector and a screen into the courtroom. Actually, my sister was carrying it. And I said, I'm here with videos of my ex. I'm here with, the stacks upon stacks upon stacks. I mean, it was literally about 3 feet tall of
Mhm.
stacks that I said, I can get you whatever you want. You tell me. I got it all tabbed, and, I could be quick. And she said, literally, she said, did Judge Zimmerman's order in your final decree instruct Mr. Jimenez that he could not give perjurous statements? Right.
Hmm.
So, I talked with an attorney, a very accomplished attorney that night, and I can't repeat what he said,
Mhm.
but he said essentially that's completely bogus. State courts, federal courts, any court can take up perjury. It's understood
Mhm.
that you take an oath and and he
Mhm.
said, Lee, you were on the radar. He said, Lee, she probably watched your podcast. She's probably been to the Facebook page.
Mhm.
She probably knows that you filed a complaint with the bar last year against her. So I said, you're right. I was. And however, the other point that he made was that she probably had her mind made up before we ever got to the
Mhm.
courtroom. And this was really odd for me because my sister dropped me off at the door and I walked into the foyer and I'm walking to security and they say, the other party's already inside, don't talk to them. And if they talk to you, don't talk back. And I said, it's good. You know, I'm fine. I'm not, I'm just here for my hearing. And who knows what he had said, but he had apparently gotten his new wife some plastic surgery and they showed up. And so she showed up and apparently flew down her Canadian family to attend. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then the worst part is I had my barely 18-year-old daughter going into the courtroom too. And I'm walking in and I'm like, bailiff, can you please remove her? And he said, you can ask the judge. And I said, okay. So as soon as I got inside, I greeted the judge. I said, good afternoon, judge.
Mhm.
And she turned about 90 degrees from me.
Hmm.
And then I said, Judge, I need to ask you to please have my daughter removed. She said, your daughter's here? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, I agree. The children should never hear this.
Good.
Thank you, ma'am. Now it's even worse. It's even more than that. So then my barely 18-year-old who has been conditioned to only respect dad's authority begins to argue with the judge.
Oh,
I know. I
um,
know.
what did the judge do? I'm sure she wasn't thrilled with that.
The bailiff got her. The bailiff took my daughter out. So,
Oh, that's good. Well, they have to learn to respect authority at some point at some stage in their lives.
sure, I know, or they'll grow up to be like their dad, right?
Right.
So that proceeded, and it wasn't great. Basically, I only won the fact, or won, I guess. I only made the point that he had willfully chosen to egregiously violate the visitation orders with our daughter.
Mhm.
And so as a result, we went through the whole thing. I did the cross-examination. The judge actually started she actually set her phone to alert her when 45 minutes was out, like an alarm. And she said, ma'am, you've got 43 minutes to finish making your case. I suggest you move on. And then at another point, she said, I'm going to give you a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to make sure that Mr. Jimenez has at least 12 minutes to make his case, and then I'm going to make a ruling.
Oh.
And so time came for her to make her ruling. So after my ex had gone on the stand and I had done the cross with him.
Good.
Yes, that was interesting. And then I remember I had subpoenaed the fire investigator because obviously I've had to study about fires in the last 35 months. And then I have probably interviewed 12 to 15 arson investigators and fire chiefs over the time. So so I'm not an expert fire. I don't want to be an expert fire or anything, but I didn't just walk out of the woods and start talking about fires either. So I subpoenaed the CFI. I have actually they won't provide me with the case file for my house fire. So there's only one page that, and I think I've probably passed it on to you and some of what I've CC'd you on, but I don't see it handy, or I'd show it to you. But it's essentially like just one page with, about this much writing on it of whatever he did, which was he took pictures. He found 2 potential sites of origin, and he said the fire was undetermined. He took a bunch of pictures. He talked with my ex, and I pointed out that there was no check for accelerants. There was no dogs. There was no sample. There was no burn pattern analysis. There was no listening to the 911 calls with the fire investigator.
Mhm.
There, my contention there was I never heard the smoke alarms
Mhm.
because there was a home inspection. It had been a recently remodeled home. The smoke detectors were working. Why did we not hear them on the 911 calls unless they had been disabled?
Mhm. That's
So
terrible.
I know it is. And there's a lot more. For instance, the fire investigator says the house was built in the 70s. Maybe the wiring was bad. Well, all he had to do was go on Zillow and look at the property, and it says completely gutted down to the studs, all new wiring, commercial kitchen equipment,
Mhm.
all new electrical. That's not really research, right?
Yeah.
Another thing he put in his report that he verified a police report was done. There was no police report. No police report. So essentially, I have made the case that I have not been afforded any criminal investigation of the fire. And
Mhm.
then on the other side of that, the civil part of it that should have protected a homeowner like me with the insurance piece of it, they sent their own investigator who completely dropped the ball. So I filed a grievance against his license with the International Association of Arson Investigators.
Mhm.
And I subpoenaed his HR file and I subpoenaed my case file for that fire. And he's in the courtroom. And I said, Judge, should a witness be here? She
Mm.
said, there's a witness. Like, yeah, Judge, did you subpoena him? Yes, Judge, I did. And
Mhm.
he's here. Why is he here? And I said, well, Judge, it goes to the point of safety, abuse, neglect of my children. If you're not going to let me argue that, though, maybe I just need to release him. She's like, yeah, I'm not going to let you argue that. And I said, okay,
Oh.
just for the records, family court, and I'm not being able to present abuse and neglect in an uninvestigated house fire. And again, this is recorded. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's going to be enlightening, terrifying, enlightening, whatever you want to call it, to hear this mother and Sunday school teacher and judge say, no, I'm not going to hear anything about abuse and neglect. And she's like, I'm worried about these two men waiting patiently back here in the courtroom because apparently the fire investigator came with his own attorney versus security. I don't know what he was. He didn't introduce himself. But I had gone to that man in the fire and I was like, hi, Mr. Thames, glad you're here. I'll be asking you some questions. And he kind of looked like I don't know, a kicked puppy or something. I was like, hey, I need your HR file and I need my case file. And he says, you're not getting it. So today I had to start the process for holding Nefco, holding his boss and him in contempt.
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
are people just gonna shirk at every, and my attorney friend, he's like, Lee, you could have I forget what he said. Maybe he said you could have declared a mistrial right there because they didn't comply with subpoena responses. Or you could have said, hey, Judge, he's in contempt too. Let's incarcerate him. And again, I mean, I'm not a law school graduate. I'm not even, I'm nothing. I mean, I'm a dietitian
Yeah.
who's just fighting for our children. So that happened. The judge issued her order and she said, I sentence you, Mr. Jimenez, to 48 hours in jail and something to do with a $1,000 fine.
Mhm.
And it's to happen tomorrow, the 16th.
Hmm. So he's going to spend 48 hours in jail and pay up $1,000.
I know for 1,100 days of 1,170 some odd days of intransigent non-compliance with court orders. So that's what she thought was fair, I guess. So I wrote him a text, and I was like, hey, I need to know when your incarceration starts so I can support my children.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently right after court, Tuesday was also a visitation day, and he just lets me see my son. And so about 5:30 that evening, he says, are you getting William for visitation? He's waiting on you. And I said, well, yes, sir, I'd love to. I said, I've got to run to the island, get my car from my friend. And then it was, he's waiting on you, Lee. We've already waited 10 minutes. And I said, Robert, you saw me leave the court after you. I mean, the bailiff walked him to his car. It was that significant. So you saw me leave the parking lot, Robert. How was I? My sister was driving me, and I said, I'm getting there as fast as I can. There was no communication. There was no coordination. It was a very chaotic day. I mean, dad went to jail. Dad's going to jail. But however, when I got my son, he had been weeping and said, it was really what, I mean, frankly, I was weeping in court. I didn't want, excuse me, my dogs are getting vocal. I mean, I don't want dad to lose his job. And so my son's crying and says, why'd you do this, Mom? Why'd you send dad to jail? Well, I didn't do it, son. These were orders, and dad made some decisions, and I'm very sorry. He's like, Mom, you've lost 20 times in court. Why can't you just lose again? And he's like, Mom, you've never lost your house. You've never lost your job. I said, really? I said, it actually has happened. Mm-hmm. It actually has happened, William. And there's even a court report from Columbia County in Georgia near Augusta, where he absolutely was calling my boss. And I went from being a golden employee to being called to the executive boardroom, told I wasn't working out. And I stood my ground, and I said, this doesn't make any sense to me. I understand my ex has contacted you, so I'm not going to resign. It will look bad for my custody battle. So you need to start offering me severance packages if you want me to leave. Mm-hmm. And 3 weeks later, my severance had tripled. So then I was able to go retain an attorney. But absolutely, but my kids won't know that. I'll never, I mean, I guess they'll probably know this tonight when they watch this video, because that's, my ex wants the sympathy from wherever it's going to come from. And I mean, you could see on your YouTube, when this was posted on YouTube, I mean, within hours, I have his new wife on there. I guess she's not really that new anymore, but she's, she's making fake profiles and saying these things about me. And then she gets her boy on there who he's also got something to add to the conversation, he thinks. But the worst part is that they took my barely 18-year-old daughter and had her start saying these things, saying pretty awful things about her mom, me. And he does not care where the sympathy comes from. He doesn't care. I mean, I used, years ago when we were in court, I guess it was 19, I used I think it's from, it was Solomon, wasn't it Solomon, who gave the parable of the moms who were sleeping with their babies, and one of them rolls over the baby in the middle of the night and kills them. So he said, I'm going to cut this living baby in half, and I'm going to give you each half. And then Solomon knew which mom really got upset with that, because they both claimed the living baby. And, the mom that got really upset is the one whose baby it was. So then he knew, this is your baby. But I said, Judge, I'm that mom. I'm that mom. He's the one that would say, okay, cut it in half.
Mhm.
Um, and this is another example, who brings their 18-year-old into court against their mother. Who does that? I'm not just that, he was going to do it when she was 14. So I had already familiarized myself with the search and seizure laws. And I was ready to say, hey, listen, as a minor, I'm going to have to invoke that.
Mhm.
So anyway, that's been my week.
I am so sorry. Yeah, it seems they all follow this pattern of using these kids as pawns. Because I had a similar incident like you did with your son, with and I told him the truth because I'm not gonna. They say not to talk about court with your kids, but when they get to be 15, 16, they're not China dolls anymore. They already know what's going on, and we're litigating for them. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry.
And I will probably get to that point one day. I will probably spill it, but they're my babies, and they, as I mentioned in in the last podcast I was with you. I mean, William was actually so anxious that rumination disorder. I mean, you would literally run off the tennis court and vomit. So
Oh,
it was 10, 20 times a day that he would vomit. So it was so bad that he was in CHOA, the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, in the emergency room, not in the emergency room, in the operating room for what they call a triple scope, where ENT, GI, and pulmonary all scope their respective
mhm,
organs. And they came out and said, he's anatomically perfect.
mhm.
This is anxiety mediated. And that was November of 16. And that's when I started trying to leave.
Now, anxiety manifests, it seems, first, and then anxiety and depression go hand in hand. And why, you have to ask yourself, why do these exes have to hurt the kids? Yeah, just to hurt you. Yeah,
Right.
that's the only thing they're trying to do. It's very sickening. These are sick individuals.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why I stayed so long. It's, people that want to weigh in, my friend circle looks very, very different. But the friends that I did have, well, you just leave, you just file for divorce, you just do all this. And I said, how many nights have you spent at my house?
Yeah.
You don't just do that. You can look at my restraining order from 17, and one of the quotes says, if you ever try to leave me, you're going to be penniless and never see your children again. And I'm still clawing my way out of that.
Mm,
And, thankfully it's better than it was, but absolutely I was penniless. And, it gets so bad that you're just encouraged when somebody sees your daughter on social media or something and she's still alive.
mhm,
So
mm,
that's that's that this is how bad it could look. And you would think that a judge would be able to assimilate all these patterns that they're seeing with him. And I'm like, okay, well, you didn't believe my witnesses, you didn't believe his son from his first marriage, you didn't believe my doctor, you didn't believe the videos, you didn't believe any of that domestic violence happened. Okay, fine. But look at what he's done since.
mhm.
Financial abuse is I'm just gonna show this real quick just in case it could help somebody, but I didn't have this until I was separated the last time. But
Mhm.
financial abuse happens in like 99% of all situations like mine, because if you're penniless and just trying to keep the power on, or trying to, you know, if you're like that, you're going to be less able to fight. Makes
Oh,
sense.
yeah.
It's effective.
Yeah, it's, and then there's legal abuse, which is in the DSM-5. Yeah, so, and the thing is, you have to stand up for yourself. Parents trying to, see their kids, they're standing up for themselves, and then it's being twisted on them and used through the kids, if I'm trying to say that right. Um,
Right. It's multiple times I've been told that I seem, I forgot, is it irrational? Or there's one police report where, gosh, what was it? It was even more, I was, whatever, I was very flustered. I was very upset, very emotional, very upset. And the lady that's done my counseling now for a couple of years, I said, tell me where I'm wrong, but I would think somebody's odd if they're being beaten or seeing their kids run out of a house fire and they're not upset. I mean, you listen to the 911 calls with my ex, and again, this is a man that's been demoted and suspended from the federal government. This is a man that was banned from 2 children's tennis centers because of the way he treated his own children. That's how volatile he is. And you hear the 911 call and he says, "What started the fire?"
He's a piece of work.
I know that says a lot. I don't know what I would do. I've thought about this obviously multiple times, and if I had ridden up on that, I don't know that I could have caught my breath and been able to stop shaking enough to call 911. But you certainly would not have heard me in the background saying, "What caused the fire?" So, and this is a man that's called 911 when I would take the children back from visitation and I'd sit on the porch because I was trespassing at his home. And I was like, "Robert, this is my grandparents' rocking chairs. I'm not gonna go, just." So it's all
Oh.
about controlling the narrative. And I think that, if you delve into the Murdaugh thing, it's all about controlling the narrative. And if you can, if you can gin up sympathy, like, "Oh, I've got a fake, I've got this bullet wound in my head and I was going to try to get this insurance money for Buster." And well, none of that really happened, but it's all about just controlling. It doesn't have to be truthful. It's just about controlling the narrative, ginning up some sympathy, and let's see how that shakes out for us.
Yeah, it just seems these personality disorders love drumming up a narrative and trying to run with it. And
the court's flat on Marion, as you know.
I think, and I don't know if I mentioned this the last time in the podcast, but maybe this judge identifies with him, his personality.
I haven't thought of that.
Yeah.
Now, this judge, this is really interesting. And I know we're probably getting close to wrapping up, but the judge, if you look her up, Deborah Malfris, she was a USC law graduate with the Murdaugh boys, with the county attorney that I've turned in for, fixing verdicts and whatnot. Her very first job after she clerked for somebody was that inside of Randolph Murdaugh's solicitor's office. So she was there working for Alex's dad as her first job. Her second job in South Carolina, Low Country people recognize the name of Corey Fleming. Corey Fleming was Alex's BF, or is, I guess, I don't know, his BFF from college, who was his son's godfather.
Mm-hmm.
She became the managing partner at Corey Fleming's firm.
Mm.
So Corey Fleming is also very interesting and to me because I follow this story as well. But in 2008, the Calverts were this very popular couple on the island that went missing from Harbor Town. And if you look them up, they lived on the yacht and they had identified what, maybe it was money laundering or a lot of financial crimes.
Mm-hmm.
With their CPA, who was named Dennis Gerwing. As it played out, the Calverts went missing. They were never found.
Mm-hmm.
Dennis Gerwing was represented by Corey Fleming. Dennis Gerwing, as they prepared to make him a suspect, or I believe Sheriff Tanner, was planning a press conference to say Dennis Gerwing is our suspect. At the time that happened, Marianne, and I have seen the crime scene photos, Dennis Gerwing was buck naked,
Mm-hmm.
wrapped in a sheet in the bathtub of his borrowed home. His head is on the faucet end. Like, have you ever gotten in the bathtub and laid against the faucet?
No. Who does that?
Right. Well, he's got a lot of Benadryl in his system and had some wine. And then he took a serrated knife and stabbed himself about 80 times. And that's how he died. And that's what Sheriff Tanner and Corey Fleming said were, and Solicitor Stone said was a suicide.
Mm.
And they had it cleaned up by lunch. I know, right?
Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah. Oh, that's creepy. Jeez.
Yes, it's a hometown homicide episode if you're interested, or your watchers are, but they make people go away really quick, like.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry you're going through all of that. I hope your relationships improve with your kids in time. Mine have, except with the oldest, but the middle one has been improving. So,
Thank you.
I'm
not giving up. I'll be there constant.
Mm-hmm.
Till Jesus calls me home, I will be there constant. And I tell my daughter, there's nothing you can say or do to make me love you any less or make you love you anymore. It's just the way that this goes. And so that's same thing with my William. I couldn't, it doesn't matter. My feelings it's fine. It's fine. I'm their biggest fan. I'm their constant. I couldn't love them anymore. They can't do anything to make me love them any less.
Mm-hmm.
I know what they're under. They need to eat. They need to feel safe at home. I get it. And I just want them to do whatever they need to do to survive at home till I can get them out of that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where I am.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm glad you came on with this update. And I know I have your contact information in the other podcast notes, so I'll just transfer it into this one too.
Okay.
And what is your Facebook group called?
It's Clean Up the 14th.
Mm-hmm.
It's the 14th Judicial Circuit. I started it thinking I would be able to identify or meet other people that had been through something similar, but either they don't want to come forward, or maybe this is not very common. But here's the thing: if it happens once, it happens too much.
Oh, yes, especially in these court settings.
So Clean Up the 14th, and at times I'll go for weeks without even looking at it, but then there's times that I might get a little bit mouthy and, use my First Amendment
Mhm,
and share some things because it's cathartic.
mhm,
When you go through stuff like this, it's just very, you feel the need to more or less, and I'll just kind of pan around and show you real quick.
mhm.
But I mean, it's just essentially, you've got to, I'm ready to prove everything that's,
Yeah.
so anyway, oh, here's some boxes over here.
Oh,
These were
Lord. Your stuff looks like my stuff.
yeah. So, again, you go into court, I can prove, I've learned I'm not even going to forget my testimony. I'm only going to show you things that I have evidence of.
Right.
Um, and it's not even like Eric Bland, who I have so much respect for. He's like, this isn't evidence of a crime. This is just the documentation paper trail of it.
Mhm,
And another
mhm,
thing he said is you can be just as dangerous with a pen as you can with a gun.
mhm. Oh, yes. Yes.
And I mean, these judges are, they're proof,
Yeah.
right?
Right. In fact, I saw a picture of a gavel, and they said this is the most dangerous weapon of all.
You think about it, like you have all these safeguards in place. I was trying to think of something analogous to the judge, and I was like, okay, well, a surgeon or a pharmacist, a surgeon that goes in and takes off the wrong kidney,
Mhm,
or a pharmacist that doses, a 3 kilogram baby as a 30 kilogram baby. All these safeguards are in place, and all these, um, we have all of these, what am I trying to say? All these tracks,
mhm,
all these organizations, all these, we have ombudsman,
uh-huh.
uh, we have, we have advocacy built into all these processes. What do we have in the court system?
Nothing.
Right. And like, if I get hit by a drunk driver today, well, um, we've got, I mean, I'll probably have 10 attorneys knocking on my door tomorrow, right? It's going
Mhm,
to be, I'm going to have all kinds of access to things. And, other crimes, the ACLU will come calling or people like that. And I'm like, what do I have if I am ripped to shreds
mhm,
in family court where they depend on secrecy and they overuse they overuse their discretion?
mhm,
When there's
mhm.
rule of law that's there and you're choosing, it's I mean, absolutely judicial abuse.
Exactly. Well, I will have you back on again for another update. Don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I am your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us here with Lee Granade in the future and other exciting guests. Thank you so much for this update.
Thank you, Marianne.